Our next speaker that I would like to call on is Dirka Prout. Dirka is a geotechnical engineer. She's the long-term past president of the London chapter of Spelling Bee Canada, and she's currently the chair of the board of directors of the Unity Project for the Relief of Homelessness in London, and she's an activist with the London Regional Social Forum. She's twice run for federal office, and she's become a leader in engineering, particularly promoting women in STEM. So welcome, Dirka, and thank you.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Lauren. And I was really heartened to hear some of the things that Brandon talked about, and looking forward to the questions, because I come from it from a little bit of a different view. I'm going to talk today about infrastructure. A good bit of my day job is dealing with infrastructure either owned by the province or municipalities. So I take a particular interest in this, and I'm going to link it to the housing crisis. So housing and homelessness is on everyone's mind. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation estimates that we need 5.8 million units by 2030. And all these new homes has to be supported by municipal investments in infrastructure. But like most Canadian municipalities, London has an infrastructure gap. Simply defined, the infrastructure gap is the difference between the investment needs and past and current expenditures. So it doesn't matter whether this is traditional views of it, infrastructure, or it's new green infrastructure, we do have gaps. So while property tax increases are really essential to maintain and renew what we have, municipalities need a new deal from the province and the federal government to obtain the infrastructure that citizens need to achieve a high quality of life. And I would also add an equitable one as well. So the estimated annual average tax increase for the City of London is going to be about 4.9%, and that is designed to maintain existing service levels. Although the budget does accommodate infrastructure renewal, growth, and new and emerging improved services, such as the measures that were talked about by our two previous speakers, one has to ask, is the rate enough? Even though London implements a best practice called asset management, and that is a procedure that seeks to take the long-term approach to efficiently manage cost, make ongoing investments, and prevent service failures and disruptions, that in of itself will not be enough to fill the infrastructure gap. So consider this quote from Scott Pearce, and he is the president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM. I quote, "Municipal infrastructure is a prerequisite to building more housing. We cannot build new housing without putting in place the municipal water, wastewater, transportation, and community infrastructure that provides the critical foundation for Canadians' quality of life." So recent research by the FCM indicates that each new home in Canada will require about 107,000 in municipal infrastructure. Quite a good sum of money. And I want to point out that this is a base cost. It does not include costs to operate and maintain these new assets, or to adapt them to climate change, or even to build to low carbon standards. These costs don't include community services such as policing, hospitals, schools, being provided to our new homeowners and or renters, and they certainly are not, that amount does not include the cost to close the infrastructure gap. Now, the 2019 Canadian Infrastructure Report Card states that a very concerning amount of municipal infrastructure is in very poor or poor condition. And even assets that are rated as fair require a lot of attention. So I'll briefly compare London's infrastructure gap in some core service areas, along with two other areas that I'm going to join together. And the only reason I'm joining culture and recreation together is even though the city of London looks at culture and recreation as two separate services, for the FCM's State of Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, they're grouped together. So we're doing really well for the services, core services of wastewater, sanitary, or storm. We have numbers according to the 2023 asset management plan for the City of London that are lower than the national average for poor to very poor or fair infrastructure in those two service areas. We fall down in water infrastructure. So where nationally in 2019, about 10% of the linear and 6% of other water infrastructure was in very poor condition. London is higher at 11%. We're also 50% higher in water infrastructure that is in fair condition. When we look at roads and bridges, unfortunately, the national report card does not cover things like mobility, like bike lanes and stuff like that. I hope that will be added in the future. But when it looks at basics like roads and bridges, nationally, about 16% of the linear infrastructure and 12 of of bridges and culverts is in poor and very poor condition. And London is higher at 22. And we're also higher when you consider infrastructure that is in fair condition compared to the national average. Culture and recreation, we're really falling short. And that is something that needs to be paid attention to as well, because these are the things that help people integrate into society, give them a sense of belonging, really give us our identity as a city. So if we look at art and culture facilities, nationally, about 9% of that infrastructure is in poor to very poor condition. But London has double that amount in poor and very poor condition. And if we look at ice arenas and pools, places where you'd want to cool off or start to stay in shape, in very poor condition, we have 12 and 12.7% in poor and very poor condition nationally. But in London, it's 21. And when we consider fair condition, it's 20 nationally and 59% in London. So quite a significant difference. So the city's draft documents admits that compared to Ontario municipalities of similar size, when we consider residential, commercial, or industrial taxes, they're all below the 2022 average. So in fact, London is the second or third lowest in comparable municipalities in each category. Therefore, council can be bold and can push for tax increases across all three categories to better reflect future infrastructure needs. That said, there are definite limits to tax increases. In Ontario, the province has been downloading responsibilities to the local governments without proper compensation since the 1990s. And the recent Bill 23 has provided developers with frozen or reduced development charges or outright exemptions. The AMO, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, predicts that there will be a shortfall of about $5 billion. And to respond to that shortfall, municipalities will either have to raise taxes or cut services. We hope London will not choose much of the latter or any of the latter, because neither improves housing affordability or really addresses the infrastructure gap. The FCM is calling on the federal government to develop a new municipal growth framework in concert with municipal, provincial, and territorial leaders. The feds need to invest in their their fair share back into public infrastructure. Because for each new home, 39% of tax revenues, in fact, the largest share of tax revenues, accrues to the federal government. And only 7% of those funds are returned to municipalities to build public infrastructure. This is really unfair. The revenue imbalance is so skewed that municipalities only collect 10 cents for every dollar collected to maintain 2/3 or approximately 60% of public infrastructure. So solving the housing crisis really means we have to invest more in infrastructure, and we must close the infrastructure gap. But for that, we need not only higher property taxes, but more crucially, I'm asking you as concerned citizens and your colleagues and friends and family to demand that higher levels of government deliver a fairer municipal framework, and they have to contribute their fair share. Thank you so much for listening.